Most peer groups don't work. Not because they're a bad idea, but they're typically poorly designed. So if you're paying $5, $10, or $15,000 a year to sit in the room and just talk business, you deserve a little bit more than that. In theory, peer groups are really powerful. I mean, they offer perspectives, you can get advice from other people, they offer accountability, you have people that you're talking with about growing your business, and they offer community. You're meeting with other people that are doing sort of the same thing as you, and you can build a relationship with them. But theory and practice are two very different things. So I want to give you 5 reasons that most peer groups fail. One reason that peer groups fail is because there's no clear standard. I mean, think about a room of people where there's someone running a $100,000 business, $1 million business, a $10 million business, and a $100 million business. There's nothing wrong with that, but when it comes to the problems that they're facing, the maybe different levels of motivation that they have, it's really difficult to get alignment. If there's no clear standard on who belongs in the room, it's really difficult to make actual forward progress. And not to mention, someone running a $100,000 business is so much further behind than someone running a $100 million business. They could both be really high quality leaders, but the problems that they're facing are so different, it's going to be really difficult for them to get on the same page. If the standard is vague, then the outcomes will be too. The second reason that peer groups fail is because there's no facilitation architecture. Think about a peer group where there's like literally no agenda. What it turns into is sort of roundtable conversations, random updates, and often the loudest voice gets heard, and the advice becomes a little bit thin because there's really no structure or architecture to the day or the time together, and ultimately it just feels like hanging out with friends, but nothing ultimately really gets done. The conversation might feel productive, but ultimately a good structure and a good architecture for the time together is what's going to produce results. A third reason that peer groups fail is advice without context. Listen, business owners and founders love giving advice. You probably do. I love giving advice as well. But the problem is without some sort of framework to gather context from a business owner, we often will offer advice that might even be dangerous for the business owner who's listening. A better process for solving issues for business owners is identify, clarify, recommend. Identify is where the business owner shares a little bit more about their issue that they're facing. And then clarify is where the other people in the room will actually ask deeper questions before moving to the recommend stage. Oftentimes, advice giving in peer groups becomes sort of like a jump to conclusion session where we're just sharing the very first thing that comes to mind, which could be well-meaning, but ultimately it might be really good advice for a different stage, but not great advice for that stage of the business. Advice without proper diagnosis is often guesswork. The fourth reason that peer groups often fail is because there's no accountability mechanism. Many groups inspire, they're motivating, they're energizing, and it's fun to be with other people in the same room who are facing similar problems to you. But oftentimes peer groups, they're not tracking commitments. They're not tracking outcomes or execution. You're sort of just talking about the same problems every single month and never actually growing and improving. So members leave energized, but they return the next month totally unchanged. Nothing actually changed in their business. Energy without really good execution really just turns into some form of entertainment. And the fifth reason that peer groups often fail is because there's no shared framework. Listen, every single person coming into the room has a different perspective, but without some set of common language that everyone can align around, oftentimes the advice feels confusing, it feels disconnected, and people are just speaking a completely different language. But aligning everyone with a shared framework where everyone's looking through the exact same lens is one of the best ways to make sure that people's businesses actually grow when they're a part of a peer group. So let me give you 5 reasons why peer groups can actually work. The first reason is that peer groups have clear revenue alignment, meaning that everyone in the room is at roughly the same revenue stage. A second reason they can work is structure facilitation. If you have a facilitator that follows an agenda every meeting, it brings a ton of consistency to your month-over-month meetings. A third reason they can work is if you bring great diagnosis before recommendations. Instead of jumping to conclusions, make sure that we understand the real issues that a business owner is facing before telling them what to do. A fourth reason they can work is with a shared operating system. If we have a clear guideline on what a healthy business looks like and everyone has the same language based upon an operating system that they're sharing, the advice gets better and ultimately businesses start to grow. And a fifth reason they can work is with real accountability. Instead of just getting together and talking about your problems, actually setting targets and ways that you want to grow every single month and then reporting on that the next time that you meet. So let's talk about who peer groups are for and who they're not for. I don't believe peer groups are best for companies doing under 200,000 in revenue or people who just want free advice or people who aren't willing to apply. But peer groups are incredibly effective if you're the right person. So here's who they're for. If you're a leader at an inflection point for your business where you feel like everything ahead is going to change based on the decisions I make in this one moment, a peer group is probably perfect for you. If you're operating a company and you want to increase structure, a peer group is probably also perfect for you. Oftentimes we don't know what we don't know, but if you get around other people who are operating businesses and you can borrow their best practices to bring structure into your company, that's often one of the best ways that you can leverage the benefit of a great peer group. And finally, if you're leading a company and you are open to being challenged by other people, that's a great attitude to walk into a peer group with. If you're more resistant to change and you kind of like how things are going, you probably want to enjoy the experience. But the people who get a ton out of peer groups are people who show up hungry, ready to learn, not so much a know-it-all, but more of a learn-it-all. And those people do really well in the peer group context. In the arena, we design our peer groups around structure, similar stages, and a shared framework. Structure in that we have a bulletproof agenda that we use every single time to make the most of every single minute. We also use similar stages, so we make sure to put you in a chapter with other business owners who are at the same revenue stage as you or very close to it. We also have a shared framework that we all use to make sure that there's aligned language and so that we're really clear on what a healthy business looks like. Now what that does is when you're speaking to others in the peer leader group, you have similar words that you're using, so you really understand what it looks like to grow your business based on the advice that you're getting. Without structure, without similar stages, and without a shared framework, peer groups tend to drift. Peer groups don't tend to work very well when they're social clubs, but they work well when they're a system that you can plug into and get more out of every single month. If you're evaluating a peer group, don't ask how often they meet or how long their meetings are. Ask how it's designed. If you want to see how we structure growth conversations in the arena, start by taking the executive flow assessment.